Mhm. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Inna Ulitko. I'm head of Methodological Department at TalkEn.Cloud platform. So, I'm happy to welcome each of you here to our webinar, to our first webinar of the course Lesson Planning. Yeah, so I'm happy that so many people have joined and actually have registered. Yes, and today we're gonna work with you in the format of the webinars. As we mentioned before at our pre-course meeting, that you will be able to participate in the webinar using the chat. Yeah, so you will be able to cooperate with the trainer using the chat. And the topic of our today's first webinar is defining learning aims according to the age, level, and needs. And our trainer is Olha Koval. I'm pretty sure you have already attended some webinars with her. Yeah, so good evening, Olha. Okay. So I do hope that okay, so unfortunately, maybe Ola had some internet issues. So while she is coming back, I do hope that we will fix them. I'll remind you that, we will be making the recording of the webinar, and it will be added in your material section in 24 hours. And please do not hesitate and participate using the chat. And before you start working with Ola, let's check how the chat works. So can you please type on the chat if you are ready for today, if you have looked through the material section. So could you please type in the chat whether you are ready for today, who has looked through the material section? So, okay, ready, good. So Daria, Olena, ready, great job. Ready, also. Julia is ready, good. Sophia, ready. Okay, Anna, I see. Okay, good. So I can see that you are ready, good. So happy about that. Yes, and so that is great because we will use your knowledge. We will need your knowledge during the webinar. And yeah, there might be some internet issues due to electricity problems in Ukraine. I do hope that everything will go smoothly. Yeah, if no, then we will just restart and come back. So sorry for some inconvenience if we have such. Ola, are you with us here now? Yeah. Is Ola here? Oh, no, unfortunately, we do not hear Ola. Okay, she'll try to rejoin. Sorry for that. Let's try to rejoin. Can we do that? So let's have like a couple of minutes and then we will be back. Yeah, so for us to actually to fix everything. So a couple of minutes and we are coming back. And while we are coming back, you can look through the material section if you haven't yet, okay?
I am. I can hear you well, but I want to check whether you can.
Okay. So a couple of minutes.
Okay, yeah, good. So that's fine. I can see that there is a delay, like 30 seconds or so, but the main thing is that you can hear me. So I will see your answers in the chat with the delay, but I will see them. So please participate, take part, and yeah, let's get started. So today we are going to have the first webinar on the topic in the course lesson planning. So today we will talk not about planning the lesson as it is, but we will talk about preparational stages and steps we need to take before we start planning to make our plans effective and to take our students' needs, age characteristics, and level of English proficiency into account. And we will talk a lot about gathering some information about our students, finding out more about them. So before we start today's webinar, I want to gather some information about you. And I would ask you to either scan the QR code, which you can see on the screen, Or you can follow the link, which I will ask Ina to send to the chat, and you will open the Padlet board. Okay, good. So Ina, I will try to share my screen just to see if it works. If it doesn't, I will ask you to help. Okay. So when you open this board, you will see two questions which I ask you to answer. So the first question is, how long does it usually take you to plan a lesson, like on average? And the second question, so actually there are two questions in one, it's what are your expectations from today's webinar, and what do you want to learn most of all? Yeah, so again, today we will be talking about defining learning aims according to the age, level, and needs of our students. So we will speak about defining the level of our students' English proficiency. We will talk about identifying needs, interests, and motivation of our students. And we will discuss how a tool can help us plan our lessons effectively and set aims, like long-term aims for our students. Yeah, so if you have never used Padlet, that's a wonderful tool. Just to type your answer, you can check on this plus, or you can click like on a plus here, and you will be able to type your idea. Then you can click publish, and we will see your answer. Okay. So here I can see that the answers are very different. Okay. Thank you for your answers. Yeah, you can also add comments to your colleagues' answers, or you can put likes if something relates to you, or if you agree with something. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you wanted to learn more about effective planning, how to structure the lesson for the best results, how to plan lessons faster. Okay, so that's a good thing to learn how to do. To learn how to create effective lessons. Okay, good. So thank you for your replies. Okay, good. Yeah, so as I have mentioned today, yeah, we will talk more. So we will talk not about planning a lesson. Yeah, so but today we will talk more about gathering enough information about our students, which will help us plan more effective lessons. And from my experience, it can also help us plan lessons faster. It used to take me a long time to plan a lesson. So I can see like some replies that you say that it takes you 2 hours or 1 hour and a half. And it used to be true about me. Yeah, but the more I learned about lesson planning, the more information I got on this topic, the more I experimented, the easier it was becoming for me to plan lessons faster and more effectively. So today I will share some tips, and I will tell you which information I like to gather about my students before I start working with them. And actually, it might sound like, okay, so this information, yeah, which we will discuss today is relevant and it's applicable only when you start working with new students. But actually, it's not really so because, okay, let's imagine that you have been working with your students for a while, but probably during today's webinar, you will understand, you will realize that, okay, probably I want to gather more information about my students, or probably there is a gap and I want to find out more. Yeah, and that's never too late to do. Or the same about the level of English proficiency. If you have been working with your students, you know their level of English, but probably when we will be discussing placement tests today and assessing our students' level of English proficiency, you will realize that, okay, I want to check something in depth, or I want to focus on a particular skill and assess how well my students can, for example, speak, read, listen, or read. And again, it's never too late to do it, and it will help you make your lessons and your lesson plans more effective in the future and set better goals for your students. Good, so thank you for your ideas. Okay, thank you. So then let's go back to our presentation. And what we will start with, that is the level of English. Yeah, so that is the first thing which we need to get to know about our students before we start working with that. And yeah, so we all know so I guess that all teachers here use a common European framework of reference for languages, talking about levels. And you all know that according to this framework, the levels of English proficiency are divided into three big groups. So these are basic users, and this group includes levels A1 and A2 independent users. These are levels B1 and B2 and proficient users. This group includes levels C1 and C2. Yeah, so everything which is below A1 is then pre-A1. So pre-elementary. So now I've got a question to you. So you can see two questions on the screen, and I would ask you to answer in the chat. So from your experience with students, or which level or levels do you prefer working? Yeah, I'm sorry for a misprint. And which ones are the most challenging for you? So which levels are like the most challenging for you to work with? So in the chat, you can put number 1 and your ideas, number 2 and your ideas. Yeah, it will be interesting for me to get to know which levels are the most challenging for you. So I will try to focus more on them, like on the most so-called problematic, difficult things. Okay. So we've got different ideas here. Yeah, so most of you prefer working with levels A1 to B1. Yeah, for some of you, B2 is also like the easiest or comfortable. So you like working with adults. Okay, we will discuss age characteristics today, but a bit later as well. And the most difficult ones are beginners are difficult to work with, or A1 is challenging to work with. Okay. Yeah, so actually, very often, yeah, so teachers prefer working with levels like from A2 to B1, and like really low levels or really high levels are more challenging to work with for a lot of teachers. So we will not talk about so this framework in detail today, but if you haven't looked through the materials which you received before this webinar, you can do it then after the webinar, and there is a link to the description of all levels. So if you want to refresh this information, so then you can follow that link in the materials and look through the descriptions for each level. But we will focus on some tips of how we can work with students of different levels of English proficiency. And let's start with, okay. It's loading, so 1 second, hopefully you will see. Okay, let's try it this way. So let me know in the chat if you see the text on the slides now. Okay, good, good. So let's use this mode. Yeah, and let's talk about beginners. This level is not described in this common European framework of reference for languages, but we can make a conclusion that everything, so all levels which are below basic level. So basically, if your students can't do what, according to this framework, basic users should be able to do, then your students are beginners. Yeah, so then their level is pre-A1. It is challenging to work with such students, and these people just start learning the language, and it might be their first experience learning a foreign language. So speaking about beginner students, we can say that they are often insecure and they are rather vulnerable, especially adult students who are beginners, because they might be successful in their career, they might know some other foreign languages, but they are beginners in English, and it is really stressful. We will need to support such students a lot. But yeah, there are some positive aspects as well, one of them is that we can see the progress very quickly, and our students can see their own progress very quickly, and it really motivates them to study, and it's really rewarding for the teacher. If we work with beginners, as for me, like the first thing we need to do is to identify whether our students are real or false beginners. And the gap in their knowledge can be really huge, or it can be really slight, but it's important to know. Real beginners are people who basically like don't know anything. So they have never had language experience. They have never used the language. You're starting with them from the very beginning. This might be like really young learners who haven't studied any foreign languages yet, or this might be adults, for example, who studied another foreign language or who have never studied any foreign languages. If we are talking about false beginners, these are people who have some knowledge, they have some language experience, they have heard some English, probably they have used some English, but their knowledge is not systematic, and we need to actualize it. We need to help them have this system to understand the language as a system more. So they might be lacking some theoretical knowledge, or some skills might be developed better than others. So we will need to see what they already know and where they have gaps, which aspects are stronger, which ones are weaker, and it will help us choose proper materials for them. So the first thing working with beginner students would be to identify whether they are real or false beginners and choose the materials according to that. Yeah, of course, that's obvious that we will need to grade our language a lot, and we might not be able to use authentic materials much. Because they're not ready for that yet. They don't have enough prior knowledge. So we will use adapted, simple materials, and we will help our students a lot. Also, careful language exposure is needed. They don't have language experience yet, so we will need to provide it to them, but in a very controlled and in a very careful way, so that they're not scared to go to our lessons anymore. It is nice to use English with them during the lessons, but sticking to very simple vocabulary, very simple structures, and speaking slowly. So the next group, that's basic users. So these are levels A1 and A2. And a lot of teachers say that A2 is the most comfortable level to work with because they already know some language. They can have a basic conversation in English, but still the progress is very visible and it is rather rapid. So they are more secure and they can communicate on some basic topics in some predictable linguistic or communication situations. So when we work with basic users, what's really important is to provide a lot of language exposure. Again, they need to get more language experience. They need to hear enough English to develop further, and it will predetermine their success when they study at higher levels. So we would try to use English a lot in the lessons. It is possible to use only English with them in the lessons if we do it carefully and if we grade our language. And that's what I prefer doing. So actually, I use only English basically like with any levels I work with. And with beginners, with basic users, it is really possible, but we need to make sure we're not using too advanced language. We can start introducing authentic materials, but carefully. So, for example, we can try to use menus or film trailers, or some brochures, but we need to think about the extent to which we want our students to understand this material. And we need to design tasks for this material, like for this text or for this audio, carefully, so that so we ask our students to get the main information, for example, only, but not focusing on details because they are not ready to understand everything yet. And that's nice to set high expectations. So because basic users are often able to do more than teachers expect from them, because very often teachers say that, oh, my A1 students will not understand me if I use English, or my A1 students will not understand anything if I use an authentic material. But actually, it's not so. So it's not that difficult for them, and they can understand language, they can understand authentic materials if we introduce it all carefully to them. So the next category is independent users. So these are levels B1 and B2. So they are rather secure in their language. They can hold conversations on different topics, including some abstract topics. They have a rather wide range of vocabulary, which they can use actively. And so they can hold even unpredictable situations. If basic users can participate in predictable conversations only, independent users can talk like spontaneously. They can use language without any preparation. But it's all nice, but there is a problem there, and this problem often happens because the students might experience the plateau effect. It means that they don't see their progress for a period of time, though they are trying to learn English, so they are putting in effort, they are trying to improve, but so it seems like they have no progress at all for a long period of time, and it can really demotivate students. There are a lot of reasons why it can happen, because like some topics can be difficult to master, or they are already rather secure in their language, and sometimes independent users think that okay, so I know it all, so what else can I study? I can use English well, and that's enough for me. So that will be the task of the teachers, to help them see their progress and help them understand that still they have a lot of things to learn and they can benefit from learning English further. Working with independent users, that's nice to set very clear group and individual aims. So if we are working with a group of students, we will discuss it like in more detail a bit later. But when we're working with group of students, that's nice to set both aims, like long-term aims for the whole group, and help students set their individual aims. It will help with the plateau effect, because if you set clear aims and you refer to them, you remind your students that that was your aim, you are improving, you are doing this and that to improve, to achieve this aim. It will help them see their progress. So we can use challenging materials with independent users. Again, it can help with the plateau effect, and it can help them get more language practice. So if the materials are challenging enough, the students will see that still they have to learn something. They will see their progress. and they will have valuable language practice. And we can try to create a kind of English-speaking environment for our students using only English in the classroom, and also motivating students to learn English outside of the classroom. So you can encourage them to try to watch some series or to watch films in English with subtitles or without. You can encourage your students to read more in English. They can try to read some fiction books, or they can try to read some articles, anything that is interesting for them. And yeah, so a very challenging category that is, so these are the highest levels, proficient users, so levels C1 and C2. And a lot of teachers are afraid of working with such students because so they are very secure, and they are very demanding, both from their level of English and from their teacher. Yeah, so they have really high expectations of what level the teacher should have. The plateau effect is still there, so they can still experience the plateau effect. Yeah, so what can help working with proficient users is really thorough preparation. So we know that they are demanding, and they might ask us some questions which we want to know answers to. So that's okay if you don't know something, but yeah, to help your students get more valuable practice, valuable knowledge, thorough preparation will really help. It's really essential yourself, making sure that you know what the audio is about, that you know the vocabulary that is used in the task, and you know not only the first meaning of some words which you are going to introduce to your students, but you also know some set phrases in which these words can be used in, or you know, figurative meaning of the words you're going to introduce to your students. So you can deepen the extent to which you teach the material to them. Again, it's nice to discuss some set phrases, some figurative meanings, some examples when some advanced vocabulary can be used, or advanced grammar structures. Very specific and clear aims are essential. For such students, the same as for independent users, challenging materials are needed. And also it's nice to encourage agency, like encourage your students to study on their own, because for proficient users to see the results, the lessons with you might not be enough. They might need more practice in their life. And again, you can ask them to watch films, read books, communicate with their friends in English, use some websites which allow them to communicate with native speakers, etc. Yeah, but for proficient users to see progress, that's important to study English not only in the classroom, yeah, but also have some extra practice. Okay, so now we know some characteristics and some tips which can help us work with different levels, yeah, in most cases, we would use a placement test for that. So a placement test, that is a test that measures someone's ability in order to put that person into a particular class or group. So usually, yeah, before we start working with some students, we ask them to complete a placement test to identify their level of English. And then according to the results of this test, we would suggest some textbooks to them. So we will set some aims with them. And we will start actually planning the course and planning our lessons. And let's see what types of placement tests are there. Placement tests can be divided into two very big categories. So these are tests for a particular level of English proficiency, and these are tests for all levels of English proficiency. If you choose for your students a test for a particular level of English proficiency, it means that this test will help you identify, for example, whether your student's level is A1 or A2. Yeah, in this case, you will use a placement test for A1 to A2 level. If you want to check whether your student's level is B1 or B2, you will give them a placement test B1 to B2. And it will work if you know some background information about your students. So, for example, yeah, you're talking to your new student, to a student who wants to study with you, and your student says, like, I have never studied English, like, I just don't know anything. Yeah, so then you can make a conclusion that, okay, probably the level of the student is beginner or elementary. So you would use a placement test to identify which level in this range they actually have. Or if your students say that, I speak English fluently, I use it at work, so I use English to talk to my colleagues. Yeah, so then you understand that, okay, probably it's B1, B2, maybe even higher. So you will give a placement test for those levels. So such tests, yeah, tests for a particular level are usually shorter and faster to do, and they are more accurate. Because the questions which are used in such tests will be we'll cover just the topics which can be studied within like 2 or 3 levels. Yeah, and then these topics can be addressed in more detail. But sometimes we don't have any background information about our students, so we can use a placement test for all levels. So actually, it's a very universal test which can be given to students with any level. Yeah, so they complete this test and you know the approximate level of the student. For example, language schools often use such tests because they don't have an opportunity to talk like to all students who wants to study in the school, like to ask some questions about their experience. So they just give them one universal test and they put them in groups depending on the results. Or some tutors also use such tests if they don't have a chance to talk to the students before they complete a test. Such tests allow us to have a general impression of a student's level, but it might be not very accurate. So after this test, you might want to check some more aspects to have a more clear vision of what the actual level of the student is. I will show you some examples of such tests a bit later. So different aspects can be checked with the help of such tests. Most tests, which you can find online on the internet, contain grammar and vocabulary tasks only, and also some functional language. But skills are not, they can be checked with the help of a placement test, but the examples which you commonly find on the internet, like usually do not include skills. And you might want to add some more tasks to the test which you want to use with your students. So usually, like all publishing houses have their own placement tests designed for their particular materials, for their textbooks. And such placement tests will help you identify like which textbook of this publishing house is the best to use. Yeah, but again, in most cases, they will include grammar and vocabulary tasks only. But it's also important to check the level of the skills development because it can be different. I also like to check how well my students can read and listen. And also we can check the development of the productive skills, speaking and writing. So again, I will show you some examples of how we can do it and how we can implement it. Add all those tasks in one test. And of course, format can be different. So we can give written tests to our students. So if we work offline, we can print out a test and give it to our students, asking them to complete. You can also print out a key form where they will need to mark their answers, and it will be easier for you to check it after. Placement tests can be done online. I really like using Google Forms for this because in the test mode, the answers can be checked automatically, so you won't have to do it yourself. You will just see the results and you will be able to look through the answers. You can use Google Documents as well, so just add the tasks and let your students edit this document. And I really like this format because it allows you to leave some comments for your students, some comments which they will see. Or it can even be a game with young learners or with teens. Sometimes as a placement test, we can use Kahoot or quizzes. If you have never used these resources before, just remember these names and Google them after the webinar. They are wonderful. Yeah, but a placement test can be done in the form of a game. And it's really nice. It will be the same test, but you will be able to give instant feedback to your students. During the lesson, you will be able to ask more follow-up questions to check whether your students understand why this option is correct. So to make sure it's not just a guess game. And it's interesting. It's more exciting and less stressful for the students because tests are usually stressful. And it can even be done orally during the first lesson, for example. So you can ask students to interview each other or to ask some grammar and vocabulary questions to each other, which you provide to them and mark their partner's answers. Or you can ask them to have the speaking part of the test together. Again, it can be an interesting communication task. And let's see some examples. So I won't ask you to scan the QR codes now because I will show all the tests on my screen. And when you get the recording of this webinar, you will be able then to scan these codes and open the tests if you want to check them out again. Yeah, and let's have a look at the first one. Ina, I will also ask you to send the links to the chat so that the participants can save them and have a look later. Okay. So that is the first example of a placement test, which I wanted to show you. It's for outcomes textbooks. It can be used if you're going to use other materials in the future, but it will be most accurate if you use this particular textbook. And you can see that that is a test for all levels. So this test is universal. You can give it to students with any level of English. So it has some parts. Yeah, so the first part, that's a test. So it's a multiple choice test. And you can see that there are a lot of questions here because that is a test for all levels. So there are 40 questions here, which will check how well your students know vocabulary, grammar, and functional language. Then, yeah, so you can collect the results. You can check them according to the key. So there is a key, and also the key will tell you, like, if your students have 10 to 20 correct answers, their level is, if your students have like from 5 to 10 correct answers, their level is like, for example, A1. So you will have a general conclusion, a general understanding of your students' level. And after that, they offer you to have also oral placement test. But you will have this part after you know the approximate level of your students. Like, for example, if according to the first part of the test, you think that your student is like a pre-intermediate student, so then you will use this section for the speaking part. If, for example, these questions are too difficult for your students, you can just use some questions, some ideas from the immediate section. Yeah, because sometimes the level of skills development can be different from the level of students' vocabulary and grammar. And that's okay. We just need to know it, and we just need to take it into account. And there is also one more part of this test, that is a writing placement test. So there are some tasks suggested, so you can ask your students to choose one option themselves and write a couple of sentences, or you can choose the task and you can give like only one option to your students, and then you will check it and see how well their writing skills are developed. You can say that there is no reading and listening part. But like listening is somehow checked during the oral placement test, because you will ask some questions to your students. So you will see the so whether they understand your questions, whether they react to what you say. So somehow you can make a conclusion on how their listening skills are developed. So then the second example, that is the Cambridge test. Okay, so let me refresh it. Again, so that is a test, an online test, which you can find on Cambridge website. And it's just a multiple choice test. There are 5 pages, like 5 sections to this test, and it's a test for all levels of English. I really like the first part because that's interesting. It checks functional language, so how well your students can react to some real life situations. So they will just need to use the correct reply. So I'm just clicking on some random answers. Please don't pay attention to that. Then the next section, that's about vocabulary and function as well. So after that, we can go to the next section, and like section 3 and 4 and 5 actually will be devoted to vocabulary, grammar, and functional language as well. And each section is a little bit more difficult than the previous one. So when your students complete the test, they will see on their screen, they will see the result. So they will see that it says like, okay, we suggest that you can use the materials of this level. And also they will be able to see in which questions they had mistakes and which answers were correct. So if you decide to use this test with your students, you can just simply send a link to them. And you can ask them to complete this test on their own and send you a screenshot of their results so that you can analyze it. And there is one more example. That's a placement test which was created by me, but I used some materials which I found online for like the content of this test. And on this slide, then you can see which materials I used. So in this placement test is not for all levels. So this placement test is only for levels A1 to A2. So it will help you identify whether your student's level is A1, A2, or it can be lower than A1 or higher than A2 if all answers are correct. There are some sections here. So the first one is use of English. It's a grammar, vocabulary, and functional language. So the students will need to choose the correct answer. You can see that there are fewer questions, 26 questions. Yeah, it's a little bit shorter reading task. It's really short, yeah, but it's enough to understand what your student's level is. And then there is also a listening task. So they need to listen to the audio and they need to choose the correct option. And there is also the last section, that is a writing task. And you can see that the question is very general here. It's how can you describe your best friend? So basically it will be suitable both for students whose level is A1 and A2, but their answers will like vary depending on their level. And I like this test because it will take some time. Yeah, it will take actually, so probably a longer time for your students, but it will help you to have a very clear vision of the level of their systems, vocabulary, grammar, and functional language, and skills development. Yeah, and as you can understand, I actually prefer tests which check like all aspects or most aspects of English because, for example, there might be situations when your students' grammar and vocabulary is like at level, let's say B1, yeah, but their reading and listening skills are low aspects of English, then grammar and vocabulary can be really easy in this textbook for them, and reading and listening can be challenging for them. So if you see that, for example, overall, your student has, so your student's level is B1, for example, yeah, but their listening skills are lower. So then you might want to replace some tasks from the main textbook which you use and add some extra materials, like which will be or some extra tasks which will be a little bit easier or a little bit more challenging than the ones you have in the main textbook. I suggest we check like all aspects or at least some skills, not only grammar and vocabulary, and it will really help us plan our lessons effectively and choose proper materials for our students. Okay, and now, so the first step is done. We know the level of English of our students. So we have a conclusion of what materials we can use. So we have seen 3 examples of placement tests. And now please share your ideas in the chat because it's really interesting for me to know which placement test would you prefer? Which type of a placement test would you use with your students? Next time you have new students, for example. So would you choose placement test 1, 2, or 3? So you can share your ideas in the chat. I think all tests are good and all of them can be used for different students depending on how much you know about them. And what are your aims while choosing the placement test. All nice. Okay. 3, I guess number 3 wins in the chat. Also 2, okay. The third is good for elementary levels. But this is just an example. So you can design tests in a similar format, like for different levels as well. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for your answers. So when our students come to us for the first time and we know their level of English, but that's basically everything we know about them. So, and our students look for us like that. So we can see the students, but actually you don't know what people they are, what's interesting for them, what are their expectations from this course. So the picture is like that, so you don't actually know who your students are. And there are lots of things which we can try to find out about our students and consider when we start working with them and planning lessons for them. Before we start talking about personal data, personal information about our students, I want you to have a look at the 4 tasks which you can see on the screen, and please share with us in the chat which tasks would be interesting or boring personally for you. If you want, you can also tell us why. So I will not read the tasks, you can see on the slide, but so you'll have a couple of seconds to look them through and share with us which one you would use. So we've got task 1, 2, 3, and 4. Mm-hmm. 3, except the skate park. So all of them except the skate park one. 3 and 4. Reading is the most boring. Wednesday is interesting. About banks is interesting for Julia. Okay. 2 and 3 are interesting for Irina. The last is very interesting. Okay, so you can see that you have different answers. Yeah, so we have different ideas in the chat. And that's also true about our students. So if we want to choose tasks which will be motivating, interesting, and engaging for our students, we will need into account a lot of factors, yeah, a lot of information. So for example, age matters. Yeah, teenagers are more likely to be interested in skate parks than adults, for example, or like young learners. Or adults are more likely to be interested in reading texts about banks. Also, it depends on the interest of the students. Some students like the Wednesday series, some students like traveling, so the last topic will be interesting for them. And it's difficult to guess. So if I was going to choose one topic for you, it would be difficult for me to guess which one will be interesting for you, because you can see that the answers are different in the chat. So let's see. Which things it's a good idea to take into account before we start planning lessons for our students. And the first one is, of course, age. So I remember, some ideas in the chat, like a lot of teachers prefer working with adults. It's more challenging with young learners. So we'll discuss like different age groups today. And I will share my ideas and tips with you. And again, if you want to add more tips, so something from your own experience, you can use the chat and you can share it with your colleagues. It will be really interesting and helpful. So speaking about young learners, like students younger than 11, 12 years old. So what's important to know about them is that they need to see, hear, touch things, play. So they discover this world by interacting with things which are around them. They have a short, can't do yet, something that is impossible for them. So they don't have long-term motivation yet. It means that, so if we tell them, oh, you need to learn English and you need to do your homework, because when you grow up, so you will get a good job and you will earn a lot of money. It is something that they don't understand. It does not motivate them. Just because they don't have long-term motivation yet, but they are motivated by the process. If the lesson is interesting for them, if they like the teacher, if they like the group mates and the games which you play, then they will be motivated to study. They are self-oriented, so everything needs to be about themselves. And they need to be able to relate to the information you are, so topics you are discussing. If, for example, you are talking about dinosaurs, okay, that's interesting, that's exciting, but we need to personalize it somehow to make it really interesting for the students, like asking them to create their own dinosaur, or asking them to tell us which dinosaur they like most and why. Scaffolding is needed with young learners. Again, you can find more information about scaffolding in the materials which we provided for you. But like very shortly, it's like paying a lot of attention to your students and helping your students a lot, taking a small step at a time, not asking your students to do a huge task at once, but dividing it into smaller steps and micro-teaching, helping your students a lot. So which materials will be suitable? Extra materials like realia, flashcards, toys can be used. And even if you work online, so it's possible. So you can ask your students to take some toys with them and tell about them. You can ask your students to show you their pet, and you can discuss some adjectives which they can use to describe this pet. So anything which surrounds your students, online students as well, can be used for learning purposes, and it will be interesting and effective for them. A lot of games are needed. Revision. So a lot of revision is usually required because so they are attention span is short and their memory span is also short. So it means that for young learners, it's difficult to remember remember some information for a long time. And a lot of teachers say like, okay, so with my 9-year-old students, we studied like new vocabulary and they knew it perfectly well. They could do tasks, they knew the pronunciation, they played some games. It was all interesting. But after 2 lessons, they forgot everything. So they just don't remember these words anymore. So I think like I'm a bad teacher and I don't know what to do. Yeah, but that's important to remember that it's okay. So their memory span is short. So while planning lessons for such students, we will need to have enough time for constant revision. So our students start forgetting this vocabulary, then okay, it's time to revise it, actualize their knowledge, and it will help them remember this vocabulary for a longer time. And of course, they need a lot of support and attention. Speaking about aims should be achievable and realistic. So the most common mistake working with young learners, like which I can see teachers make, is that they have unrealistic expectations of what young learners are able to do at their age. So we need to make sure we take these features into account while planning the lessons and choosing the materials. So the next group is teens. I really like working with teens, but yeah, I know that it is challenging. Yeah, and a lot of teachers don't want to work with teenagers, and I can understand why, because okay, yeah, really, it might be challenging. So teens, yeah, want to be adults, so they think that they are adults, but yeah, so they want to be allowed to do things which adults do, but they don't have the same level of responsibility, and they are not ready for it yet. So Irina said, yeah, moody teenagers. Oh yeah, they can be moody. I agree. Yeah, so they have their own opinion and it is important and it is good. It's okay. Their opinion might be different from yours, or it might be different from other students in a group if you work with groups, but that is okay. So that's important to show them that you respect their opinion. They can have their own opinion and it can be different, but that's fine. So, okay, you understand it, you let them have their own opinion on things. Yeah, and you can create the atmosphere in which all students can discuss their opinions in a respectful way. They seek for peer approval. So it's really important for them to be cool, yeah, so that their peers can see that they are successful, they can do things well. And we would want to create success situations for our teenagers, for them to be more confident, for them to get even more motivated to study. So if, for example, we think that, okay, this student is not really strong or is not really confident in this topic yet, so probably you wouldn't ask the student some questions on this topic in front of the whole class. You would micro-teach, you would help the student to become more confident in this topic. And after that, maybe next time or in a lesson, you can ask them in front of the others. And the teenagers are often very active, but they can get tired quickly. So what we can consider while choosing materials and planning lessons is that we can try to use like not so-called childish materials with them, something that is more for adults. Also, we can use some active games, active tasks, but they can be rather short because, again, they can get tired quickly. So we can try to use tasks related to our students. So we can take into account their interests, yeah, or activities which they prefer, which they like more. It will show them your respect. It will show them that you are attentive to them and it's important for you what is interesting for them. And you try to use it in the lessons. And it's nice to give them some choice. So you can ask them to choose what game they want to play in the next lesson or which topic they want to discuss next time. Again, it will show them your respect. It will show them that you treat them like adults. and they can also be more responsible if it was their own choice. Aims can be moderately challenging. So we can have like rather high expectations of what they can do. But again, so we remember that peer approval and success situations are important. So moderately challenging aims will work well. And adults. So a lot of teachers like to work with adults, and some teachers are afraid to work with adults because they are demanding. So adults usually have their own vision of how they should study, of what a teacher should do, of what they should have in the lessons. And sometimes it can be different from your vision. So with adults, I like to discuss it before we start working. For example, I can tell students like, okay, I use this, I would use these materials and such tasks in our lessons. So I would use only English with you. So I would try, and I do it because, yeah, and you would like to explain your students why you think that your approach, your methodology will work and will be effective for them. So they have more experience, so they know themselves better. They usually know like what works for them, how they can study effectively. Usually adults are motivated, which is a good thing. Yeah, because they pay their own money, they spend the time going to such classes. So they are also very often progress oriented. Yeah, so it might be interesting for them to have a good time during the lessons, have some fun, but yeah, progress and the results are usually the main priority for them. So speaking about the materials, and planning, time-related planning will work well. So usually adult students want to achieve a particular level of English proficiency within a particular time period. So you would need to check whether your students' expectations are realistic, and you would want to set time-related goals with the student. Like for example, in a year, I want like my level to be B1, yeah, for example, and you will work together with your student to help them achieve the same. Also useful and applicable materials are preferable. Yeah, working with adults, if they study English for job purposes, okay, so that would help us understand like which topics for reading or listening tasks we should use. And speaking about aims, yeah, we should try to make them personal and specific. So specific and also timely. So we need to help our students have a clear vision of which results they can have within which period of time. And so that's not all. We not everything we should know about our students to plan effectively for them. So there are also some more things which we can take into account. For example, students' interests. Yeah, so we can find out this information observing our students during the lessons. So if we are attentive enough, we can gather it information, or we can take notes, yeah, on their answers to some questions, or we can just ask them before we start working with them. We can simply ask them like, what's your hobby? Or we can play a game. Would you prefer something or something? Or would you rather? Or you can ask students which topics are interesting for them, what is their favorite, whatever. And it can be a nice communication game. Like you can prepare 5 questions which begin with what is your favorite? Yeah, and you can ask your students to prepare like 5 more questions which they want to ask to you or to other students in the group. Also, that's nice to know what motivates your students. Yeah, what type of motivation they have. And on the screen, you can see 4 types of motivation, and you can see 4 pictures. So let's try to have a small game with you. So I would ask you to try to guess. So which picture relates to which type of motivation? So let's have a look at the first one. That's instrumental motivation. So please try to choose a picture and put your ideas to the chat. So do you think that the picture for So I can see D. Okay, any other ideas? Instrumental motivation. And actually, I agree with you. So that is D. So students who have instrumental motivation, they have a very practical aim. So for example, they study English because they want to get a new job, or because they need to pass an exam, or because they want to go traveling and they will need to use English. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. That's integrative motivation. So which picture you think is number 2? C. And I agree with you. Students who have integrative motivation, they need to integrate to a society or to the target community. So for example, if students are going to move abroad to an English-speaking country, so they might have integrative motivation, and it means that you will focus not only on the language itself, but also on some social and cultural aspects. Okay, the next one is intrinsic motivation. So we've got pictures A and B left. Intrinsic. Yeah, okay, so that's A. So students who have intrinsic motivation, for them, it's important to enjoy the process, have a good rapport with the group mates, with the teacher. So they want the lesson to be interesting and engaging. And I can say that I'm the person who has instrumental and intrinsic motivation. So when I study English, I want to improve my language for the job purposes, for some professional purposes. So I've got instrumental motivation, but at the same time, it's really important for me to have interesting lessons, because if the lessons are not interesting, probably I will skip them more often. And the last one is extrinsic motivation, and you can guess that that's picture B. So students who have extrinsic motivation are motivated by some external factors. Like, for example, kids might not want to let their parents down, or boss, or a job can motivate some students to study English and improve their skills. Or for students who have extrinsic motivation, the teachers' praise might be important. So praise is important for all students, but for students with extrinsic motivation, it's like really essential. And we've got one more type here, that's resultative motivation. And I guess like most people in the world have this motivation, but for some people it can be a bit stronger, for some a bit weaker. And if students have resultative motivation, it means that they are motivated when they see their own progress. Okay, so let's practice a bit. You can see stories of 2 students. It's Andrei and Kira. I would ask you to look through the information. It is something that they say about themselves and why they study English. And I want you to think which type of motivation they have. And you can put your ideas to the chat. Let's start with Andrei. So what do you think? Okay, I will give you just 10 seconds to think, maybe 5. Okay, let's start with Andrei. I can also see answers about Kira. Okay. You think Andrei has instrumental and partially instrumental. Okay. So I think that he's got, of course, instrumental motivation because he needs to pass a test. Intrinsic motivation because he says, I love my English courses because the lessons are fun and it helps me remember the material better. So intrinsic motivation is there. He can remember the material better if the lessons are fun. And resultative motivation, because because it's important for him to see how he is improving his English. So it motivates him to study further. So choosing certain aims, and choosing materials for this student, we will take it into account. So we will try to set very specific aims. Like, for example, we can discuss with Andrei what is his desired result of the test, and whether it's achievable, actually. So the tasks, the materials should be aim related. He is interested in passing the test. So we are going to use the materials which are similar to what he might have in the test. And we would try to use interesting materials. So we would find out what is interesting for Andrei, which topics are more interesting for him, and we would try to stick to them. So, and I can see also answers about Kira. Okay, I agree with you. She's got integrative motivation because she's going to move to Canada. And she needs to integrate there. And she's got extrinsic motivation because she doesn't want to let her colleagues and her boss down. So she feels this responsibility. So for Kira, then taking it all into account, again, we will use aim-related material. So we'll use a lot of authentic materials. We will use listening materials with Canadian pronunciation motivated. Okay, good. So thank you for your ideas in the chat. I agree with you. And also, we can find out what our students' needs are. And here you can see an examples for the future are what is the most difficult thing for them now. So speaking about English, they are asked to rank their skills from the strongest to the weakest, according to their opinion, and tick activities which they like most. So such questions will help us know what our students' strengths and weaknesses are and how they prefer to learn. Again, it's important for us to take it all into account while we are planning the lessons. So we can gather such information in different formats. Again, we can create a Google form and ask those questions. We can create a Kahoot or a quizzes game. We can have a discussion, or we can just absorb our learners and take some notes. And this information can be used to prioritize the time in the lessons. Like, for example, if we see that listening is the weakest aspect, like for this student, because this student does not feel like really confident. Completing listening tasks, then it will be our main priority. So we would make sure that we have relevant materials and relevant formats, which will be interesting and effective for the students, and it will help us set aims effectively. And let's have a look at some questionnaires which we can use to find out more information about our students. And the first one, I would ask you again to send the links to the chat so that the participants can save them and check them out later. Thank you. So the first questionnaire is a quizzes game, which I offered my students to play during the first lesson. And you can see that there are questions like, what do you like? So they can choose several options. What's your favorite book or film? What do you do at your free time? So I ask about their interests. So then I ask them, what do you like doing in the lessons? And which tasks are the best? So I want to see what are their weaknesses and strengths are and how they like to learn. So there are also some more questions to find out how they like to learn, why they learn English. So it addresses their motivation, what do they think they are good at, what is difficult for them, and whether they like doing their homework, just to know, how high the chances are that they will complete like a really huge homework task if you give it to them. And the second example, that will be suitable for teens or for adults as well. It's in the format of a Google document, which you can send to your students and ask to complete. So they need to also tell about their interests. They can choose, so what's their job? So they can choose the option which is suitable for them, about their employment situation, how old they are, when they started learning English, again, about some strengths and weaknesses, how they like learning English. And I really like the last questions here, asking students to describe a good teacher in their opinion, or describe a great lesson. And these questions can give you a lot of information on how you should plan your lessons and how you should set aims for such students. Okay. So again, you will get the recording of this webinar, so you will be able to scan the QR codes and check out those questionnaires. You can see the links in the chat, so you can save them for future. Yeah, and when you gather enough information about your students, you can create a group profile. So if you work with groups, it will be a group profile. If you work with individual students, it will be a student profile. And here you can see an example. So that is like the conclusion. So here we sum up important facts, important information we know about our students, which we can use planning our lessons or planning our course. Yeah, and you can see that in this description, motivation is mentioned, interests, yeah, just to remember that, to keep it in mind. And also that, what's important for them in a teacher. Yeah, and if you know it, you will try to be this teacher for your students. And everything we know about our students will help us set aims for our students effectively. And if we know enough about our students, so they will look for us like that. So we will actually see them. We will see what type of people they are. And we will design really effective and beneficial lessons for them. And also we will use this information to set aims for our students. And I've got, again, one more small task for you. Please look at 3 examples of term aims the teacher set for their students and choose one which you like most of all. Yeah, and you can also provide some ideas like why you like this option more. So we've got 3 examples, A, B, and C. Please read them and choose one which you like the most. Okay, so I will give you just 5 more seconds to think. And please share with us. Sophia says C because it's detailed and time-bounded, which is important. Okay, B, C. So I agree. I would prefer C as well. Yeah, it's student-oriented and mentions clear and specific skills. Yeah, so I agree with that. And I think that C is the best option out of these 3 ones because it is more specific and it is more complex. So let's see what's included. Okay, I wanted to use animation for that. So 1 second. Here, different aspects are mentioned, and different types of goals are set. here a linguistic aim. Yeah, so this aim relates to one student. Yeah, so this student will have improved his speaking skills and grammar knowledge. And at the end of the level, all of his skills will be B1, yeah, because some aspects are weaker, so some aspects are stronger. So we just want to address weaker aspects more. So that is a linguistic aim. We also have a communicative aim. So a communicative aim is about communicative or like real life situations which our students need to participate in, or some types of conversations they need to have in the future. Like, for example, this student needs to be able to communicate with his colleagues more easily on job-related topics. Yeah, so we will focus in communication, we will focus on job-related topics, depending on the sphere in which the student works. And we also have a development aim. So during our lesson, also help them to develop other skills which are not language related, public speaking skills in English. Okay, so then we might watch a video about great speakers, or we can read a text about some tips which can help the student become a better public speaker. And we can try to role play some situations. We can ask the student to prepare a presentation about something. Yeah, so, and we will, and it all will be in English. So he will practice his English, but at the same time, he will improve his public speaking skills in English. Yeah, and let's see some more examples. So I will give you just 5 seconds to look through this example, and you can put to the chat what types of aims you can see here. And then we'll discuss together. Okay, and 3 more seconds. Okay, so I will share my ideas with you, but still, like, you can type yours in the chat and I will see them. So, oh, yeah, I can see your ideas. Thank you, Sophia. Okay, Sophia asks the second arrow communicative aim. Okay, we'll discuss it. Yeah, we've got here a linguistic aim. So it's clear we want, and we specify, yeah, so how we will understand that this aim is achieved. We will understand that a linguistic aim is achieved when all of our students pass the final test successfully. Yeah, and the second one, I would say that that's more of a development aim because we want to help them develop their soft skills, yeah, like working in teams and communicate with each other in English. Okay, so it also can be a communication aim. I agree with you. And yeah, communicative aim is also number 3 because we want our students to be able to communicate on basic topics in so-called real-life situations, and it will be a part of the test. So that is how we will check whether this aim is achieved. So most of the students will be able, yeah, to do, or all of our students will be able actually to do it. So we can have some role plays with them, for example, to help them practice. And we can see that it's about a group of students, and the first 3 aims are for the whole group. And we can also see that we've got some information about individual aims as well. And it's really useful if you work with groups of students, then of course we need to set aims for the whole group. But it's also important to encourage our students and help our students set their individual aims, something very personal and something that will motivate like this particular person, this particular student. So it should be something like really, really interesting for them. So for teenagers, often teenagers like anime and manga. So their individual aim can be to so after this course, I will be able to watch anime in English, and I will be able to understand the general idea, like what this anime is about. Yeah, I will be able to read my favorite comic. So you can encourage your students to do it on their own, or it can be a part of a lesson. Yeah, so then you can ask them to refer to this individual aim when they lose their motivation to study. And there are some tips which will help us set aims effectively for our students. So again, if you work with groups of students, that's a good idea to set both group and individual aims. Let students know about the aims. Yeah, it's nice that you decide that, okay, I want my students to do this, that, and that. But it's also nice to show these aims to your students and ask them like, okay, do you agree with that? Do you think it's really useful for you? Or maybe you want to add something. Yeah, so we can add something else if it is important for you. It's a good idea to set aims together with your students. It can be a part of your lesson, or you can ask an individual student to take some notes before the lesson, and you can discuss the aims together. I really like to use this SMART system to set aims. If you don't know what it means out, it means that our aims should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And when we set aims, we need to refer to them. So for example, if you work offline, so you can create a poster with the aims like for this student or for this group, and you can keep it somewhere in the classroom. Or if you work online, you can create a folder on Google Drive, yeah, and you can add some notes, or you can create a Padlet board, and you can you can add the aims of your students there. So that you can refer to these aims when you want your students to know that they do have progress, that they are moving to achieving their aims, and when your students are losing their motivation, so you can remind them what are their expectations, what you and they want to achieve at the end of this course. And of course, yeah, it's important to let students see their progress. So you can refer to the aims and you can see like, okay, we want to be able to communicate in so-called real life situations. So we have discussed with you, we have had a role play game, pretending that we are customers. So at a shop, yeah, for example. So we are moving to achieving this aim. It is important for us because that was our aim and we want to reach it. Okay, so and actually, that's it. So that was the information I wanted to share with you today. And now I want to sum up everything which we have discussed and have like a very, very small task with you. So I will show you 3 situations. They will describe some problems which the teacher has. And please think, why do you think it happened? And how can the teacher solve or prevent this situation? So let's start with the first one. So you can see the problem. So please think and share with us in the chat why it happened and how can you prevent or solve this problem if you have it. Okay, so waiting for your ideas. So you can focus on some tips or some things which a teacher can do to prevent this problem or to solve it if it has already happened. And actually, it's a very common thing, so a very common problem which I see while observing some teachers as a methodologist. Okay, I will start sharing my ideas, but also please add yours to the chat. Yeah, so we can see that from this situation that the placement test has not been like really effective. Okay, oh, I can see your ideas now. Uh-huh. Yeah, so I like your idea. So we can try to explain that listening is more challenging than other aspects and give your tasks. Okay, yeah, of course. Or start from listening, like simpler listening tasks and slowly integrate more difficult ones. Of course, yeah, I agree with you. But as for me, yeah, so the problem was so that the placement test was not effective enough. So the teacher hasn't checked the level of the skills development, because if the teacher said, okay, her listening skills are weaker, so we need to maybe change the tasks which are provided by the textbook, or maybe we can simplify them a little bit, like to gradually, yeah, make them more challenging for her. But if you can see that it happens in the classroom, then okay, it's never too late to have this part of the placement test. So find like comfortable level of listening tasks for her and practice listening more with this student, and then gradually she will be able to listen to more challenging audios. Okay, good. Let's have a look at the next one. That's a real life situation. That's a situation which some of my friends had. Mm-hmm. You should ask them about their interests. Okay, so, and that's interesting for me because this problem is really common, and it's something that I commonly hear from other teachers who I work with. But the solution is very simple. So we can just ask our students what's interesting for them, or we can try to gather this information before we start working with them or in the process. Yeah, and try to use the topics which are interesting for them in our materials. Great question. Yeah, Irina, I like your idea. And mm-hmm. Okay, and I can see like some more ideas. I can see Sophia's answer, so it's better to figure out. Okay, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, and we can see that in the last situation, yeah, so our students, the students are experienced. Maybe we can encourage our students, yeah, watching some films, or reading some books, or reading some articles, or yeah, we can even talk to our students and explain that, guys, that is the plateau effect. It happens sometimes, but we will do this instead to solve this problem. So I will help you. We will stick to our aims. Yeah, and your level is improving. Probably like not always you can see it, you can feel it. So that's the task of the teacher, to help students realize that their language level is actually improving. Okay, good. So thank you so much. for participation. That was nice to be with you here today. Like I've got like the last task for you for today, and this one is really quick and really simple. So I would like you to share in the chat what was the most interesting thing or the most useful thing we've discussed with you today, or which tips or which ideas would you like to use with your students. Yeah, so please share your ideas in the chat. It would be really interesting to know your answers. And again, so also if you have any questions or if you have any other comments, you can share. Yeah, you can also add them to the chat. Okay, Julia says tests for levels. So you will be able to check out those test examples later, yeah, because you will get the recording and you will be able to scan the QR code. Discussing possible problems and tips, solutions to them. Okay, thank you for sharing, Anastasia. Okay, so while you're still typing your ideas to the chat, I think that Ina can tell you about some organizational moments. So thank you guys a lot. It was a pleasure for me to work with you today, despite all the technical issues we had.
So thank you, Ola, so much. Yeah, so sorry for those technical issues. Unfortunately, we faced them, but actually, I guess everything went smooth and Ola was able to provide all the information she wanted to. Yes, and today we have completed with you, yes, the webinar, Defining Learning Aims According to the Age Level and Needs with Ola. And the next Wednesday, so in a week, we are meeting up with our second trainer, Alina Korshunova, and we will be talking with you about lesson planning, aims, anticipated problems, and solutions, right? And before the next webinar, just a kind reminder is that you should look through the material section, right? Okay, just to work better during the session, yeah, for you to get easier all the information through. Just reminding that the recording of this webinar will be added in your materials section in 24 hours. So we will do it as soon as possible. So you will be able to watch if you have skipped anything, any information, and just to find links, QR codes, and so on and so forth. So I guess we can finish. And thank you, Ola, so much. See you in 2 weeks. Yes. And see you guys. Thank you for joining. We're really happy that you were with us. So everyone, enjoy your evening and see you next time. Thank you. Thank you. I see ladies are typing in the chat. So thank you, Yulia, Anastasia, Sophia. Thank you so much. Okay, good. Thank you so much and see you in a week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.